Hello everyone, welcome to another session of your computer class. In this session also we will be continuing with our chapter 3, that is constructors. Before we start with the today's session, let us see what were the topics we discussed in the previous session. Initially we start with the constructors, and constructors were the member methods having the same name as that of the class, and it is used to initialize the instance variables of the objects. Then we discuss the types of constructors and default constructor, non-parameterized constructor, parameterized constructors, and copy constructors. So in the previous session, we discussed the default constructors as well as non-parameterized constructors with examples. So we'll start with parameterized constructor in this session. We'll see what is the definition of parameterized constructor. A parameterized constructor is a member method with the same name as that of the class name, and it is used to initialize the instance variables with the help of parametric values passed at the time of creating an object. In non-parameterized constructors, there were no parametric values or argument values, whereas in parameterized constructors, we have parametric values that will be passed at the time of creating an object, and we'll see through an example. See the example program. Class P const int a comma b, and a and b are instance variables. Then P const, so this is a constructor, and here you have noticed that int x comma int y, they are parameters, and constructors are used only to initialize the instance variables. So we are going to initialize the instance variable, that is a and b, with the parametric values, that is x and y. So that is what here it is done. So a is equal to x and b is equal to y. Then void display system.out.println, values of a and b are printed, that is a, then space plus b, then public static void main p const object is created. And while creating the object itself, we wanted to pass the parametric values, that is 5 as well as 10. So 5 will be stored in x and y will be stored in 10 will be stored in y, and then obj.display. So we'll run and check the program. No syntax errors. Right click, void main, and values of a and b are 5 as well as 10. Next topic is constructor overloading, and you know what is overloading a function because you have learned in the last chapter. Here also same concept, only constructor overloading too. So we'll see a process of using a number of constructors with the same name but different types of parameters is known as constructor overloading. Let us see through an example constructor overloading. So class name is oconst, then int ab are instance variables. Then first constructor is oconst and there is no parameters inside, and this is non-parameterized constructors, and it is used to initialize with the default values. Say a is given 0 and b is given again 0. Then again second constructor, that is parameterized constructor, and int x comma int y is given, and x values initialized to a and y values initialized to b. Then again one more constructor, that is object has been passed to this constructor. So here the parameter is oconst, that is class name, then ob, object itself is passed. Then a is initialized with ob.a and b is initialized with ob.b, and the display function is used to display the values of a as well as b. Then public static void main. First we have created one object, that is oconst, obj is equal to new const, then calling with that object display function. And second again created one more object. Since there were three constructors used, you may need to create three objects because constructors can be only called by creating the objects. Then second object is created here, obj1 is equal to new const of 100 comma 200 because it is receiving two parameters. Then again with that object display function is called. Again third object O const obj2 is equal to new const of obj, because third constructor is calling a object. Then with that obj2 dot display, with this object we are calling the display function, and here we are calling the object that is first object. So we'll see how it is going to work. We'll check the output, run the program, and here A is equal to 0, B is equal to 0. So this is an output for obj. So obj was calling the default constructor. So initialized with 0 and 0. Say A is equal to 0 and B is equal to 0. And again, next A is equal to 100, B is equal to 200. This is an output for obj1, because obj1 was calling parameterized constructors. So A is equal to 100 and B is equal to 200. Again, third type of constructor was again calling the object. So it was calling the object obj, and obj was having the values, initial values, that is 0 and 0. So obj2 also having initial values, that is 0 as well as 0. Now we will see what are the differences between constructor and a member method. Functions you learned in the last chapter, and constructor you learned in this chapter. So you know what is a function as well as constructor. So now we will see what are the differences between a constructor and a function or member method. So first point, the constructor has the same name as that of the class name. So constructor should be having the same name as that of the class name, whereas function is different from the class name. So function name need not to be the same. So whenever you are using a function with the same name of a class name, then it becomes a constructor. So function name should be different that of a class name. Second point, the constructor does not need to be called in the main class. So whenever an object is created, automatically the constructor will be called, whereas the function is called in the main class to get activated. The next point, it will never return any value. So constructor will not return any value. That is why while defining the constructor, not even void we mention. Then a function may or may not return a value. Whenever the function is returning a value, then it will be having a return type, that is int, float, etc. If function is not returning any value, then we mention void. The next point, constructors are usually public. So constructors must be always public, whereas function need not to be public. It can be public, private, or even protected too. So these are the major differences between a constructor and a function. Constructor chapter is completed with this section. Literally the chapter was really small. So I hope you are clear with the topics which I explained in today's video as well as in the previous session. And based on constructors, programs are compulsory. At least one program you will get based on constructors, with the functions included in that. That's how it used to come for board exams. So be thorough with the concepts. Thank you.